Well, from our Pretoria studios, Chief Economist from Efficient Group, Dawie Roodt, joins us now. Dawie, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. For anyone listening to the news over the past few weeks, it will be hard to believe that none of this Greek chaos will impact us here in South Africa. Will it?
Well, in fact, it's already impacting on us here in South Africa. The reality is that Europe is one of South Africa's biggest trading partners. Whatever happens in Europe will certainly impact in the real economy, on the South African economy and the rest of the world, but not only on that. The financial markets globally are very much integrated. South Africa has got a very liquid and very well integrated financial markets with the rest of the world, and we've seen that the euro came under pressure over the weekend as an example, and that's an example how that will impact on the South African economy as well. So it's a matter of impacting on our real economy as well as via the financial markets. The real crisis, and I think pretty much for the Europeans, is that what's going to happen next? If eventually the Greeks are forced out of the Eurozone, can we ask a question, who's going to follow? Greece is a very small economy in the whole Euro setup, but what about another economy like, for example, Spain? That's a much bigger economy, and if the same fate befalls Spain, then I'm afraid it can potentially have a huge impact on the economies of Europe and consequently on economies like South Africa as well.
Well, Dawie, it's a bit of a conundrum here, though, because, I mean, here you have Alexis Tsipras wanting the Eurogroup leaders to write off the debt, but you have countries on the other side here, like Spain and Italy, saying, well, you didn't give us that end of the stick when we asked for money. That's a bit of a problem there, and there's probably some infighting in Europe.
That is the political problem that Merkel, for example, faces. But because some of those economies that are part of the euro area, their pensioners will typically retire at a later stage than the Greeks. Their pensions will be less than that of the Greeks. The reality is that the Greeks, in some instances, their value tax rate is lower than that of many other countries in Europe. Now, the question that some of these countries are asking is that we are paying more taxes, we retire later, we've got lower pensions than the Greeks, and now you expect us to actually contribute more to the Greeks. And that's the political dilemma. That's the sort of questions that the politicians are faced with, including Angela Merkel as an example. Now, what the Greeks have said, they said they do not want this austerity anymore. But I don't know what they're going to put in, what they want instead of that, because they need to go back to their partners in Europe, and they need to tell their partners in Europe, we want your money, we want you to keep on bailing us out, but they have to give something in return. And they just said they don't want to give something in return. That's the dilemma. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think chances are very good now that the Greeks eventually will be forced out of the euro area. There are two aspects that are important. The first one is the fiscal issue. That has to do with government finances. The government has run out of money. They will not be able to keep on paying their pensioners and the civil servants for very much longer. The other issue has to do with the banking issue, and the banks also are running out of money, and they need to go to the European Central Bank to get more money. One of those two institutions simply will not be able to see this week out.
Yeah, and I mean, the ECB has got a big task on its hand. Does it hand out more money or sort of extend that facility it's used to back up the banks in Greece? Which way are they likely to go there, Dawie?
I think the ECB, they're in a crisis meeting right as we speak. I think the ECB will try to accommodate the banks as much as they possibly can, because the reality is that our pensioners and people that simply do not have cash. If you can't have cash, you can't buy medicines and food and the like. So I think there will be some sort of emergency measures that will be put in place. But on the fiscal side, it's very difficult for me to see how the stabilization fund will actually transfer more money to the Greek government as such. To the banks perhaps, but not to the Greek government.
And then there are these remarks by the renowned economist Joseph Stiglitz. Now, he was scathing against Eurozone leaders in his last reaction, saying Prime Minister Tsipras is being treated unfairly. He says all they want is to get rid of the leftist leader. What do you make of these remarks from Stiglitz?
Well, let's be honest. The reality is that the Greeks will not be able to repay their debt. Even if there's some sort of bailout agreement, still the Greeks will not be able. Some of this debt will eventually be written off. Now, there are different approaches to this. You can say, listen, we're not going to write off this debt and you can force the Greeks out. Or you can say, we're going to write off some of your debt. Or what you can say, let's all put all our debt together into one basket and let's have a proper fiscal union. And I think inevitably that is the inevitable outcome eventually of what's going to happen in Europe. There will eventually be a fiscal union. And that's essentially what Joseph Stiglitz is saying. Either write off some of this debt or pool the debt together. And I think that's eventually where we're going to end up with. Of course, to get there is a long process, it's a long and a very painful political process, because some surplus countries like the Germans, you have to convince their voters that I am prepared to take over their debt for some time in order to keep the euro area together. And politically, those sort of questions are not easy to sell.
All right, thanks very much indeed. Dawie Roodt, the chief economist of Efficient Group, thanks indeed for talking to us.